and welcome to UNSW Security Society's CyberCast. We're here with a new guest today. His name is Richard Buckland. You guys might know him if you're at UNSW, or if not, he is a professor of cybercrime, cyberwar, and cyberterror. And he's also teaching the new cybersecurity degree. So tell us a little bit more about yourself, please.
Hi. I'm a professor here at UNSW, and I've been here forever, I think.
Oh, wow.
About 100 years. So I've always been interested in, as I'm sure all of our students and lots of the listeners have too, in working out how to get around things. So when there is a set of challenges or obstacles or rules, especially when you're young and not very powerful, to achieve things, you've often got to get around the rules. So I've always found that really interesting, a bit like playing a game. So I did used to do a lot of, such as it was back then, hacking. When in my uni days, we were on mainframes, so it was mainframe hacking, and that was quite fun, and that was to achieve things at university that otherwise I wouldn't have been able to do, like to have storage for my files and things like that. I had to get around systems. Back then, that wasn't a jailable offence. That was just funny. And then I became very interested in privacy and cryptography around in the 90s when companies started collecting lots of data on people, and so did governments. And so, and it just sort of started from there. And then cyber, I think the whole world's caught up to the potential of cyber now, the fact that computers are everywhere, and when they go wrong, it can be a catastrophe. And probably for the first decade of us loving computers, we weren't really thinking a lot about what happens when they went wrong. We were more thinking about what happens when they go right. Yeah. And I think now people are more aware of that, particularly because the bad guys can deliberately make things go wrong, and they're out there beavering away trying to find out ways of making things go wrong. So,
Yeah, back in the day, like, it was really, really different to how it is now. Like, what you just mentioned, that you had to do mainframe hacking. That's a lot different from the systems that we have now. So then how did you come to teach cybersecurity at UNSW, and why did you start teaching it?
Yeah, I mean, it is different, just to your point about that. It's different because the underlying hardware and notion of how things interacted was different, but still it's very, very similar in terms of the same principles, the same, you find a vulnerability, essentially a little gap that actually on the mainframe, it was usually interacting components that you could make interact in unexpected ways that would let you get around things. How did I get into teaching? Well, when I love teaching, it's my favorite thing. But when I was young, I didn't do teaching at all. My first job out of uni was in financial mathematics. I was something called an actuary. And I did that for quite a while. And that was a very high-paying job. And it was interesting mathematics. But after a while, it became a bit boring.
Yeah.
I mean, and lots of nice people do actuarial studies, and it's not boring for them. But for me, it was boring because I liked learning all the new stuff. And after a while in my job, I found I was just doing the same thing all the time, applying complicated mathematics to things, which was fun, but applying it in the same sort of way to the same sort of problems. And I got a bit bored. So I went back to university, and I decided eventually to do a PhD in pure maths. And while I was doing that, I did a bit of teaching on the side, just out of interest, and I fell in love with the teaching. And so doing pure math is more fun than being an actuary, but doing teaching is even more fun than doing pure math. So I became a teacher. And cyber, I guess there weren't really many people interested in cyber pre-2000. It was seen as it wasn't a field where there was much published, and the publication tended to be in cryptography and, networky stuff that was really more networks than security. And no one really thought the security of systems was important. I remember Linus, the Linux guy, often the community would get to him about problems with Linux and how various things could change to make the Linux kernel and just Linux in general more secure. And he used to be scornful of security. He would say, yeah, sure, I could do that, but it would slow us down 2%. It's not worth a 2% slowdown. So just no one cared about security then. So we were one of the first unis to be teaching it, I think, and we've just kept with it ever since because it's clear how important it is, and I think events have caught up with us now, and it's clear to the whole world how important it is.
Exactly. Like, it's quite interesting how 10, 20 years ago, even the best, like the most experienced tech developers like Linus, creative Linux itself, they don't care about security. It's like all about speed. It's all about getting the best optimal software algorithms out. And security just becomes like a second thought, or even just like at the back of their mind.
Yeah, that's right. And it makes sense that it was like that because, Linux had to compete with Windows, so it had to be high performing. If it was too slow, he was just focusing on the problem in front of him. And security problems for a while were just theoretical.
Yeah.
Because it was hard to exploit them to make money. So you could see something was insecure, but you think, yeah, that's all right. No one will ever attack that, or it's not really a problem. But now, of course, you can attack a Linux server. You can do have all sorts of effects in the real world that make you money and cause inconvenience to others. So now it's suddenly become in your face if you don't get it right.
Yeah. So it's actually good that cybersecurity is becoming more popular. And so with that, there's the rise of cybersecurity education. So then, what, with your experience, how much have you seen cybersecurity education change a couple of years versus now?
Yeah, it's changed massively. As I said, in the early days, if we go before 2000, it was a lot of people teaching cryptography, information security, and information security sort of dominated the field. There weren't many textbooks. The textbooks there weren't really very good or useful, except in a theoretical sense. So I remember when the banks started hiring cyber people. It was very early on, and there weren't any courses training people in the things they wanted to know. They don't want someone who can, do zero knowledge proofs. So that's really fun and interesting. They don't need someone who can implement algorithms that are well known, cryptographic algorithms themselves, because there's already perfectly good libraries to do that. They want someone who can make sensible decisions, who can weigh up risk, who can do all sorts of things. And there wasn't anyone teaching it because none of us academics had been taught that as we went up. When we went through, the closest we got was how networks worked, how operating systems work, a little bit of security at the kernel level about how to stop processes interfering with each other. But we weren't up against malicious adversaries. So there just wasn't much around. So in the early days of teaching cyber, it was just people who were good at X, Y, or Z, teaching security from the point of view of X, Y, or Z. So if you're good at networks, then you'd spend an awful lot of time on looking at packets, and you'd think network security is everything. If you're good at operating systems, you might look at how, and you're interested in operating systems, you might look at file level permissions and how process security and isolation between processes worked. And if you'd done a bit of cryptography, and everyone had, you'd run these extraordinarily detailed courses on cryptography, which were lovely but completely useless from the bank's point of view. Whereas now it's pretty clear to make a difference in the world, rather than just doing theoretical papers, you need to be able to go and be pragmatic, to deal with crisis, to deal with stress, to notice what attackers are doing and adapt to it. All sorts of skills that perhaps a traditional computing degree doesn't really teach you. Traditional degrees teach you comply with the spec, be good, read the manual and see what's supposed to happen and make sure the code does. We're all focused on being good and complying. And to be successful in cyber, you've got to actually ask hard questions, and you've got to say, what would happen if we went outside that? What happens if, let's not care about the behavior of the system when it's in spec. What about the behavior of the system when the inputs are out of spec? And in the old days, in a computing degree, that would even be ruled out. Someone would say, yeah, but it's not in spec, so we don't even have to test that. That's the user's problem. So I think cyber's very different now, and unis are struggling to catch up. I still don't think around the country, or around the world really, there's many good there's not yet a really good idea about how to teach cybersecurity because again, there's just not many professionals who are in the industry coming back to uni and doing the teaching. It still tends to be theoretical academics, and also, we just are slow to change, and cyber isn't. The cybersecurity threat landscape is changing really quickly. So, and it's a new discipline too. In the old days when I started, computing wasn't a discipline. There wouldn't have been a school of computing. At some unis, it spun off from electrical engineering. That's what happened at UNSW. Some of the electrical engineers who were coding stuff, they really liked it, and they started doing more and more programming stuff.
Yeah.
Even when I turned up here in the 90s, there was still lots of programming being taught in Elec Eng. And in other unis, it came out of maths. The mathematicians were interested in it. There's lots of mathematical models for computation. So it took a long time for computing to be established as a discipline. And even now, there's general agreement about what a computing degree would look like. Learn how to program, learn data structures and algorithms, learn a bit of debugging, learn processes, no longer waterfall, thank heavens, but learn software management processes, learn about testing, learn about user interface stuff. So we've started to get an idea of what you do a bit of AI. But in cyber, it's still really contested. And in fact, when we set up our new cyber degree, I wished I'd recorded it. The amount of pushback we had from traditional computing engineering folk when we wanted to put some psychology in the degree, when we wanted to think about how, indeed. There was actual vigorous pushback from considering anything other than theoretical sort of model-based approaches to security. So it's really hard. It's really hard to get that. And the other interesting thing is that in industry, if you look at who's really great at cyber and doing good jobs as cyber professionals, or who are really good attackers or red teamers or anything like that, a lot of those people don't even have degrees at all.
Interesting.
It is, because unis didn't teach it.
Yeah.
And if they did, you sort of had to suck up to the lecturer to get a mark. That's the sort of idea of how unis work. You do what the lecturer wants, you comply with their rubric, they reward you with marks. And a lot of really good people interested in security don't like sucking up at all. And a lot of them had truncated degrees at uni. Like they'd turn up, be there for a year and get expelled or get bored and leave, or some would leave school early and not even get into uni, into the
ones who try to break the system.
Yeah, the ones who don't like doing what they're told.
Exactly, yeah.
So how can a uni produce great cyber people when the people we want to produce should have a rascal mindset? They shouldn't really be, my students shouldn't be trying to please me. It makes it easier for me if they do. Like a well-trained dog is better than a dog who's crazy.
Like if you're an attacker, like you'd want someone who can give you their information right away.
That's right. And if your firm says to you, do this and this is good enough, and you say, I'm a bit worried about that, and they say, don't worry about that, and you don't worry about that, then you're not really a good cyber person. Good cyber people say, I know you think that's okay, but I'm still going to poke it and probe it. So, So I think that makes it hard to teach cyber too. Not only is it new, not only don't we, the teachers, have hands-on practical experience in it, but the very sort of mindset we want students to have isn't necessarily a mindset that's going to make you popular at a uni.
Yeah, that's true. Like the reality of cybersecurity is just that it's not like, you do A and then you do B and then you do C. It's very, very chaotic. And you could say that there's like sort of like a very human aspect of it as well.
That's right.
On top of that, you must be very familiar with the two words, artificial intelligence.
Oh yeah.
Have you experienced or like encountered much of it in like your teaching, or like are you planning on having it impact your study?
You mean you're interested in the intersection between AI and cyber? Is that what you mean? AI and security?
Like artificial intelligence, it's impacting a lot of industries. Like it's impacting the art industry, just like it's impacting the development industry, software development. It's really impacting everything, and like it's gonna catch up like really, really quick. Like it's kind of incredible the sort of progress we're seeing right now. Just like a year ago, it wasn't able to animate or create a video of Will Smith eating spaghetti, and now like you can barely see a difference. You know what I mean?
It's like spaghetti test. It's reached that level. I think computing started off with mainframes, and it took people a long time to see the benefit of having decentralized essentially home computers on everyone's desk. And then that changed everything. And then we had the same with the internet. Everyone had local networks. Microsoft didn't. I remember I actually met Bill Gates once and we were trying to show him how awesome the internet was. This is when I was working at Microsoft. And he said, yeah, he just didn't see that it would take off. And the internet changed everything. Then Internet 2.0, the read-write internet idea changed everything. And AI is the same, I think. It's just something that when it happens, it just massively multiplies possibilities in what we can do.
That's true.
And it changes everything. And it means our existing habits and expectations and notions of what's possible are wrong. And it's then like a rush in the Wild West. It's like everyone's heading off to find gold. And the first people that think, I remember when the guys from Atlassian started building their software, they were so successful because no one had really thought much about community, read-write internet collaboration. And there were lots of old tool sets around there. And they wanted a tool set that was embracing this new era. And now, they're a bazillion-dollar company. And it's the same, I think, with AI. It just makes all these things possible. But because the field's new, it's a green field, it's the first person that notices, oh, I can do this now and solve an old problem with a new thing, So, yeah, it's very exciting. And particularly in cyber, I think it's interesting. Because whenever there's changes, opportunities for criminals, and whenever our habits and reflexes and what we are used to and have sort of heuristics for dealing with changes, then our natural reactions won't necessarily be right. And that gives a little gap for attackers to exploit. So if you're used to being able to verify someone by talking to them, and you haven't yet twigged to the fact that talking to someone over the phone now, you can't tell who you're talking to, even if you know the person well. Yeah. And video, we still think seeing someone talk is compelling. And that's why the influence campaigns where they make fake videos at the moment, deep fake videos, are so effective because people still have a lot of trust in video. But there'll come a time where that now would seem silly and we'll stop relying on that. But in that transition time, when our expectations and habits are still in the old world and what people can do is in the new world, then that's a ripe opportunity for attackers. So yeah, AI is very exciting. Just like distributed algorithms were when we started, when Google appeared, when we started doing AWS, all the idea of distributing rather than doing everything on a single processor, that sort of revolutionized everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, AI is the same. And in terms of AI and security, I'm doing a project at the moment where I'm going around interviewing the CISOs, the Chief Information Security Officers or Chief Risk Officers or other important people at large cyber mature companies, asking what they're noticing in AI and asking what their thoughts are about how to properly manage AI. And we're producing a sort of a resource for people in companies that haven't yet thought properly about AI. So you can say, well, at least here's what all the top companies are doing. So, that's what I could try. And it is so fascinating hearing them talk and hearing everyone's ideas about AI. But in particular, what they're reporting at the moment is they're not seeing new attacks.
Okay.
AI is making attackers more effective at doing existing attacks. The newest thing they're seeing is the whole deepfake, the problem with authentication that we've known theoretically for a long time.
Yeah.
It's hard to authenticate. In fact, I sometimes call that the fundamental problem of cybersecurity. I just don't think authentication is a solvable problem. And AI is just making it more obvious that that's the case. So the deep fake thing and better scams is where they're seeing most of the operation at the moment. People spinning up whole fake websites and nests of connected websites and things that in the past you could have done, but it would have just been so time consuming and slow to do it that no one would ever do it. Now you can do it in the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
But other than that, they're not seeing super duper, and they're certainly seeing AI helping people write malicious software. They're seeing the attackers using AI in their tooling that they're using to attack. But we haven't yet seen new attacks with AI. And I think that's probably the shoe waiting to drop. At the moment, it's just what we can do, what the attackers can do already, but, scaled up massively and sped up and with a lower entry bar too. So you don't need to be an expert at this or that now to be able to do this or that.
Yeah. So it's like, I think really new exactly. But once someone figures out how to do something new with AI, now that's where the problem arises.
Well, yeah, that's interesting. That's what Rumsfeld would call the unknown unknowns. It's just hard to even know what that could look like. I remember when the first time we had ransomware, that was such a shock. And then ransom attacks where data was exfiltrated and published and people were blackmailed to not again, that was a shock. And now we're used to it and it's just normal, but it was just a new way of attacking us that we hadn't thought about. I'm sure there will be new ways of attacking using AI. I mean, potentially AI agents that are able to be attackers is an interesting challenge. But yeah, it'll be obvious when it happens, but until then it's unknown. And it is very hard for a defender to defend against unknown. You really have to trust on your process, trust you've got good frameworks, trust you've got good response capability so you can identify things, trust you've got good mitigation so when a disaster happens it doesn't infect everything, that there's a limit to how much damage it can do. Trust you're constantly watching and monitoring, trust you've got friends who will come to you, all the sort of fundamentals of how to be a good defender. I think we need to just be getting exactly right until this becomes normal and boring, and then it can be business as usual. But yeah, very interesting time now for AI.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that cybersecurity education itself will change because of AI, or do you think it will just remain sort of the same?
Well, I think education is changing from AI in the same way it changed with the internet, in that there's cheaper ways of doing things from an education provider's point of view, and there's less onerous ways of doing things from a learner's point of view. The challenge is we don't always do what's good for us. So, I mean, about, they studied London cabbie brains, the brains of people that drive cabs in London. And after they have to set a very big elaborate test, or in the old days you did, to be a cab driver. You essentially had to know all the streets in London and how they all interacted and be able to do route finding and things in your head. And the interesting thing was that it's quite famous, a result that London cabbies' brains had a noticeably different structure. The location and reasoning parts to do with geolocation and maps and direction finding were structured differently and perhaps larger, I can't exactly remember, to normal people's. In other words, to prepare for this test changed their brains. And I am worried now that as we use GPS, I don't know if you've noticed it, my navigation ability is getting much worse because I just rely on GPS to do it.
Yeah, a lot of my friends, they say oh, I'm really bad with directions.
Yeah.
You're not bad with directions, you just haven't practiced.
Well, that's it. That's
That's the problem.
And if people don't practice handwriting, it will atrophy. If you don't practice directing, directing yourself around, it'll atrophy. I used to do calculations in my head all the time because we weren't allowed to use calculators at school, and the early calculators weren't very good. But I've noticed, I used to do a fair bit of maths teaching. I think people do less in their head now because it's just so easy to do it. So I think that's one of the risks of AI, that we will depend on it more and we will outsource, some of our brain to it. It'll be an external brain in some way. And areas of our brain and our capabilities, intellectual capabilities, won't be exercised and practiced and developed so much because AI does it for us. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's great. Overall, we have more capability. But if AI gets it wrong, or if we suddenly need those skills and we don't have them, it's a worry. So I wonder about that with students and learning. There's just some things to learn, like learning the piano. To learn the piano, I just think you have to put hours in and you have to do finger work on the piano. And I don't think that's something you could just cram in a week of intense piano practice and have an app help you with it. I mean, I'm sure apps could help, but I think at the end of the day, you just have to put a lot of hours in.
Yeah.
And I think with coding, that's the same. And I think with thinking like a security person, as soon as people start trusting systems and outsourcing a lot of their reasoning and, the cognitive things you have to do to be good in security, it's just, I don't know, I just see it as a risk. I think it's still good. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but yeah, I think it will change education. At the moment, worldwide, we're seeing a lot of people not coming into uni anymore. Why would you come into uni? And
that's true. You can do it at home.
Yeah.
With the help of your bot.
Yeah, that's right. And in some ways, I think that means the unis are just paying the price because they could get away with doing a crap job before, because people had no option. You couldn't leave the uni
Yep.
and you had to turn up to lectures. So we could just do the very worst thing. We just had to not be the very worst uni that you could go to in terms of teaching, and we'd get away with it because there's no comparison. Once we have recorded lectures and once people can learn things online, if you're not doing a good job, people can go elsewhere to learn or do other things to learn. And I think that's just getting easier and easier for people now. Actually, now I'm thinking about it, this is similar to the point we made about security. So I think I'm worried that students will use AI to write their essays because of mark time pressure. They'll get AI to help them solve difficult problems. That they'll just outsource lots of stuff to AI, so they'll still get the marks and still be able to hand in the thing.
But unfortunately, they don't build the skills.
But they won't necessarily themselves be changed.
That's right.
And you could argue maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't employ people as themselves anymore. Maybe we employ everyone as a union between them and AI. But, I think education is about changing people. I'm very old-fashioned. And I would like, that's why I love UNSW, because we don't just teach coding using tools, and we don't use like high-level languages and platforms to do everything. We actually expect people to be able to go down to the metal. We expect them to understand how chips work. We expect them, if you had to, you could rewrite the microkernel yourself. You know, we want people to know, even though you don't have to do that stuff anymore, we want people to have the capability to go down all the way. Because I think to understand how things work at any level of abstraction, you really have to have a good understanding of the level of abstraction underneath.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This might be a bit of a catastrophizing, but like, what if we just didn't have like that sort of technology anymore? What if we had to build it from the ground up?
Yeah.
And I was thinking, like with AI or like say with calculators, for example, it's pretty easy to make a calculator. It doesn't take much resources. Calculators, they're like $4 to $10 each.
Yeah.
And they have like a very long lasting battery. And that's like the great thing about calculators. Is that it's so easily distributable.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't matter too much whether we can do mental math or not. But with AI, like you require these big centers, these really, really big centers.
Oh, I see. It might be more fragile or brittle. It might be taken away from you just when you need it.
Exactly.
In some circumstances. I'd still even argue with calculators that whenever I'm doing something or solving a problem in my head or someone's talking to me, I'm often doing maths. Like if someone says something, I'll be dividing two things and just reasonableness checking their answers are okay, or Trump says something insane. While he's talking, I'll mentally be checking, but that can't be right because there's not enough people in that country for that to happen. So, but you're right, I could do it on a calculator. Yeah, I mean, we should use our brains to do what they do best. It's hard for someone brought up in one generation it's hard for anyone, I think, to contemplate difference, to imagine what that surrounds me is inevitable and important, and what that surrounds me is just an accident of time and is not important. And it's very hard to know. And the philosopher David Hume talks about this, the is-ought dilemma. Have you ever heard of this?
Ooh, I'm not too familiar with it. Wait, what's it called again?
Is-ought. So ought means should, essentially. So, and he just notices that people always mix up with how things are, how the world is, with value judgments about what's good and what's not, how the world ought to be. So, for example, if you're conservative, it's, or politically conservative, it's often good enough to say this is how things are and how they have been, and hence that's how they should be. It's very hard to break that. I always get caught with the is-ought. So, maybe everything's fine, but I would like to churn out students who, like you say, in a tricky situation when a novel thing's happening, they still have mental skills to solve it themselves rather than needing external tools.
Yeah. I was just thinking, hold on. Let me just gather my thoughts. That's something, like what you mentioned, the is-ought thing. That's something that our generation will have to start thinking about for the future generations as well. Who knows, they might get an even advanced version of AI that really starts to think about it the way that our ancestors might have thought about calculators when they came out.
Yeah. No, 100%. It's a human condition, I think, because we are able to change things with technology, that things will change. And what you're used to like all the people that were used to a world of computers without malicious adversaries.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard for them to adapt to a world where there are malicious adversaries. It's very good to challenge yourself to change. I'm always proud and happy when I'm able to change my mind about something. And I think as you get older, it's harder and harder to do that. So I would challenge all your listeners,
Yeah.
however old they are, to change their mind about something.
Yeah.
And if you try really hard to find something to change your mind about, and if you've gone a week or two and you've not been able to change your mind about anything at all,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's time to have a good hard look at yourself. I mean, maybe everything you think is perfect,
Yeah.
but more likely, you're using confirmation bias and you just can't see. Yeah.
That's actually a really beautiful thing to like sort of close on.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming to the podcast. Thank you for talking so much on security, especially with education and AI. Like with the rise of AI coming, we gotta change a lot of things. We gotta really start to exercise our minds rather than letting it, wilt away using AI.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you so much.
Well, exciting. Who'd want to live any other sort of life? Who'd want to live a life where you don't have to change your mind? You don't have to exercise, that everything's just the same. Boring. Yeah, you might as well be an actuary.
Exactly.